This is our stack of questions. And there's one which we began to get to this morning and put off until later, and there were many people came up to me during the break and asked if we could get back to that one. So perhaps we can start with that one this afternoon. And that had to do with, you're speaking about the dynamics and the experience of completing karma with someone.
Yes, we left karma hanging. Well, it is quite true that there can be no part of karma which is left hanging. All parts of karma must be finished and balanced. Karmic relationships between people exist in many different ways. But karmic relationships between and among people are not the only binding avenues of responsible learning and responsible care on earth. You have karmic ties to the groups in which you hold membership, to the nations you help and lend your energy to support, to the land that you have either refreshed and integrated or laid bare, to the animals that you have either cared for and loved and used in appropriate ways, or ignore. You have karma to the land itself and all that grows on it. You have, therefore, karma, which is simply a way of stating reciprocal learning. Reciprocal learning, reciprocal care, and reciprocal appreciation. With all living things. The karmic ties that you have to human beings are the most paramount of any, of course, because each living being is an entire universe of the world. And as I have tried to suggest before, and your ties to those universes are crucial. People have a curious notion, which they outlive and which they outgrow, that they are independent units of action, that they are selves. But as they learn in the unwinding process, not in the winding, here another footnote. In the winding process, it is very important that you are a self, it is very important that you have boundaries, dimensions, characteristics, and egos. It's very important. You have all kinds. That's how you learn. You bind yourself up in the dimensions of activity, thought, and feeling of individual selfhoods. In the unwinding process, you unwind those skeins a little bit in each life. And you discover, first to your great horror, and then to your great pleasure, that you never were a self, that you were a mirror, a reflector, an amplifier of living processes, organized in different ways. But as you are learning selfhood, so you are casting your relationship, defining your dimensions in each life as separate from your companions in that life. So now you're in this role, mother. Now you're in that role, child. Now you're in this role, rich man. Now you're in that role, poor man. Each of those roles involve you in relationships with a great many people. And in each of those relationships, there should be a disbalance. As you are learning particular dimensions of selfhood, so you extract and push down in your relationships with others their boundaries of selfhood. So one time you're on top and one time you're on the bottom. One time you're opposed, another time you're together. Always there is friction. There should be. That's how you establish the boundaries of difference. And your own meaning in any life is to be synthesized by the boundaries of your own being. You must use your minds to give you a place in life, and to give you, and use your values to give you a meaning in life. And if you have a certain meaning, someone else, if you impose great meaning on some dimension of your life, you have to hold down meaning in opposite dimensions. If you pull to you power, you must pull away from others power. So there's an endless permutation of pulling, pushing, upping, downing, all done with companions. That's how you learn. Now this dimension, now that dimension. Yet all of that learning is limited. Do you know that everything you ever learned is limited? At each stage in life, you learn certain things and you believe them with all your heart. And you institute your activity and you proclaim your role, and you do your work, filled with that conviction. And it can be a right conviction, right in that time, in that place. But it is limited. And in another life, you get to learn how it is to be on the opposite end of a relationship with someone who has lived out forcefully those convictions that you let out forcefully before. And it seems a pile of worms. It loses some of its glitter. It takes on the boundaries that held that learning become a little flaccid. That is when you experience the other side of it. And yet we all do that, and that is the divine plan. And the pattern by which we interrelate with others is good and bad, noble and savage. It is a pattern which must contain all feeling, that these patterns, designs, and blueprints must contain and hold in human experience all possibilities of feeling, ideas, and levels of ideas and feelings. And we learn those by living them out with others. In any life, it's very hard to get across the particular point which I espouse, which seems so very real to me. And that is that your lives just poof, go like that. That a life, it seems to me, I said earlier, the material world has been provided as divinity in slow motion. But it seems to me that it goes so fast that and that the possibilities of each life for learning are so limited that that one in any one life usually takes off only a piece of learning to consolidate, learn, set the boundaries for, in opposition to this one, in harmony with this one, above this one, below that one, and so on. They seem so quick to me. They seem to go so rapidly. And that from my own perspective, and also they seem for all of us so limited. We only have so much to burn up and use up. And in a life of unwinding, and here I think we get to the reason why it seems so limited to me. In a life of unwinding, the possibility of acceleration of that process is greatly enhanced. It is possible to use this short time to rip through, to work through so much. That is not possible in winding lives. In winding lives, there must be those consolidations, that orderly learning, this patterning, that there. It is not possible to speed them up. But in unwinding lives, it is possible to zip them up. And to what it is, of course, always useful to stay alive during the process. So, so there are some limits to that. But if one does understand the process, if he understands the process and lives the principles, there is such great possibility for using this little speck of time in an accelerated way. And that seems exciting to me. And life seems to me explosive for that reason. And I like to see people just zipping around and getting on with it. And, and sometimes I think I may stir them too forcefully. But anyway, it seems so short, the dimensions of a life, so prescribed, and the process so clear that if we could just link ourselves with it, then we through. But those linkages, now back to karmic ties, back to karmic ties. Of course, it is not, there is in the notions and ideas surrounding winding, the notions and ideas surrounding, for example, reincarnational principles in winding. There's a certain kind of principle, and that is that, that as you pursue the winding process, you are this kind of a man, for example, taking gender as a single dimension, and to the degree that those facets of character are seen as bounded by a masculine identification, so there is an equal bound, an equal balancing of a feminine, of a kind of feminine identification, learning dimensions with a feminine boundary. There is the idea that if someone has insulted you and held you down in these particular ways, that your turn will come. That it will be your karmic right, your divine obligation to hold them down in just the same way. So that there is this idea of, and if you have been a rich man, so you will be a poor man. And if you have been a poor man, so you will be a rich one, until those are balanced. The knowing is balanced. So there is an idea and the idea is essentially correct with respect to the winding process of balance, of having this kind of experience counterposed with this kind counterposed with this kind, until you have created vessels of being to hold all that knowing in balanced and rounded way. So there's that notion of the balancing of karma. And you are in a winding life. You are brought to people that you have wound, that it's as if you had wound the power skein pretty tight. And there's a kind of friction between you and the person that you wound that tightly. So now it must be wound still, but loose, and until it is balanced, but always wound, and always balanced. In the unwinding process, it doesn't work that way. Karma in the unwinding process does not work that way. In any individual life, there is a part of the life that does work that way. In any individual life in which you come sailing into life on the structure of your earlier sanskaras, and those rise to the surface now and structure your personality in this life, you are actually bound to other people. The sanskaric threads that you have in your own being loosen as you grow, and you see they are attached to other people. And they are attached to hold certain kinds of energy to other people. Now, it happens in a screwy way. People are like kind of untidy spools of kite yarn. You walk past someone, and there's a kind of a radiance that releases some mortar in the tissue of your consciousness and in theirs. And when that mortar is released, poof, a tie between you is seen to exist. And that tie may be at many anatomical levels. And those ties then pull you into contact with one another. In the unwinding process, you are puppets. All of you are puppets. And the strings that tie you together are your sanskaric threads, and they are loosened automatically as you come in contact with one another and you recognize the tie. When they are tied, then that gives meaning to that person. Oh, see, this is so difficult to understand and is such a different perspective. You think you pass someone and you like the look in their eye and the shape of their being and the charm of their voice or something like that. And you don't know that's illusory. And there is an actual structure between you. And it is that structure which alerts you sensitively to the meaning of that person. Is that clear? I mean, and so you walk around with these invisible ties, and you unroll them, but you can't unroll them by yourself. You discover that indeed yourself is a skein of yarn wrapped with other skeins of yarn. And that in fact you are just this skein. And so are they. And you discover you're not even independent. You're wrapped together here and down here, up here. Then you free the wrapping, and then you discover, aha, there's another wrapping at another time and another place at another level. People are wrapped. They are tied. They are tied to one another. And the ties carry the energy of life and meaning. And they bring now. In the unwinding process, you don't just balance. You lift. You lift. It is your responsibility in the unwinding process not just to balance, but to infuse your highest knowing and your highest behavior to, once you have balanced, to lift. And that lifting, you raise the threads on your own consciousness, you pull them up. And they are tied to your associates. And you strain them. Because to the degree that you pull them up, your own up, you also pull theirs up. And that's a strain. And the ties, which formerly were down here and could be awful for them, are now up here. And they radiate down to them. So that whatever you are, however well you may be able to conduct your life, you send it down in a divine rain on other people. And you may strain them. You may strain them. But if you send it down with the energy of love, then it comes down, and whether they know it or not, it helps them. It nourishes them. It loosens them. It may loosen and nourish them at a level that is below their awareness. But nourish and help them, it will. So it is not possible, as you are unwinding, just to balance. You must pull up, and you must give. You always must give more. You always must give more of the best you have. When you give more of the best you have, a great many people will not be able to recognize it. Their ties to you do not include an awareness of that. But so you give it anyway. They are not able to be aware of it yet. But as you give it, it builds them anyway. And at another time and place, it will help them in their awareness. It helps them now in their total being. So, one of the karmic karma changes, and you don't just balance, you boost. And let me give you an example. One time, and you boost and boost and boost. You see, karma in the winding process has a certain kind of tension from this pull and that pull. This kind of obligation and that obligation. If you unbind yourself from other people, the way you do it is to give them only your best. That means that you don't have to get anything back from them. It means they're no longer contractual, where it's a give and take business. You give so much of this and get so much of that. Gradually, you just give and give and give and never extract a contractual basis, never pull tight the thread of you owe me this, you owe me that. That you just give, and that loosens your own skeins, and it carries the skeins to them that it carries that kind of radiant energy, carries it to them. One time a man said to me, I have had a dispute with an institution. This institution has, through a misunderstanding, has resulted in, they have not paid me $1,500 that they owe me. And I said, do they know that they owe you $1,500? He said, no, they think they don't. And I said, is there a question in this argument, whether or not they do? And he said, yes, they have a good, they have a good reason for believing what they believe. And I have a good reason for believing what I have to believe. And he said, how would a great saint balance this? Said, what do you think a great saint would do about this? And I said, well, it seems to me that if there's an argument, people will get angry and defend what is right. He said, yes, that's true. They've already done that. He said, we've had lots of fights about it because they know how right they are and I know how right I am. He said, but the point is, I don't really care. I said, the money isn't important to you. He said, no, I don't even need it. And I said, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to keep on fighting with people, or do you seem to understand their perspective and their point of view, and you think that they have good reason? He said, that's right. And I said, I think if you were primarily interested in unbinding yourself, what you would do, I mean, you would just consider this, go to them. Tell them that there's been a misunderstanding. Apologize to them for your part in the misunderstanding. Tell them that you're sorry that this misunderstanding has colored your relationship and made an earlier relationship, which was productive and happy and companionable, sour and angry and fierce. Reestablish with them the earlier feelings that you worked so hard to build. And consider telling them that you were wrong, and give them back their money. He said, you think it might be handled that way, huh? I said, I don't really know. Things can be handled many ways, and I've just spun out this argument to suggest to you that if you really want to do, if what you really want to do is keep alive the warmth and feeling and treasure the relationships that you have with these people, and it's irrelevant to, and you understand the reasons for the disagreement, that you take the burden of that on you. You just give them your understanding, give them your love, and give them the money. He said, I'm not sure that will balance anything. It's true. It won't balance anything. It would free things. It would free things. And so anyway, I would not like to get caught in this anecdote and have to defend in every instance all those principles. It's just a way of suggesting that he had it in his power to continue giving them his love, affection, indulgence, and understanding, and he could respond to pressures to do just the opposite, but he didn't need to. So, and he didn't balance it, he gave more. I think the role of spiritual understanding and spiritual responsibility is trying always to give more, or yielding always to giving more externally, internally, and and perhaps not drawing attention to that externally. So, if you have to pull up, all the relationships that you have ever had in life. You don't just balance them at the level that you initiated them, or the next level at which you may have pulled them up before. You must pull them all up. And that is not all done by personal psychological interaction. That is often done by spiritual love, once the personal psychological part is finished. Is that at all clear? So you must pull them all up, all parts of your experience, at all levels, must be finally offered to God. Pascal?
The question that I'm looking for was one of a set of questions that had to do with politics and had to do with world history. And it was expressed in several different ways, but it came down to a question about the role of America um, at this time in history. And
Pascal, the reason you cannot find that card is that someone stole it.
in that case, I think what I will do is open it up to the audience and have a few last questions from the
Right.
audience. Yes, Tony.
I've noticed that many people carry in their appearance the imprint of some subhuman form, like an animal, a bird, a particular one, sometimes very striking.
Yes.
What is the cause of
The question, excuse me. The
Sure.
question was that the questioner, who is an artist, has noticed that people seem to carry, at least occasionally, some people seem to carry the imprint in their physical appearance of what seems to be a subhuman form, an animal or a bird, and he's wondering about the cause of that.
Well, Tony, I have sometimes been accused of carrying in my own being subhuman forms. The one most often remarked on in my youth was that I looked like an olive on top of a martini stick. The reason for that, Tony, has to do with a statement that I made earlier, a general principle that I made earlier, and which I will now restate. That that there are prisms of light prisms of divine energy that, that materialize on earth in certain forms. So that the quality of the energy takes a certain shape held on earth at a particular time, held on earth as part of its balance at a particular time. There are animals that materialize certain divine energy in a certain shape. Now, human beings, when human beings have all those shapes within them. They have the possibility of permutation of all those shapes within them. And some of the divine energy is known by human beings according to its experiential quality. For example, there is a kind of feeling, a dimension of feeling, of thought and feeling, that is called, experienced by human beings as, say, devotion. Devotion. There are levels of devotion, kinds of devotion, but devotion is a quality of energy, a melding quality of energy that has characteristics at certain levels of creation. It is materialized as a basic force. That energy is materialized as a basic force in certain, say, animals. There are, for example, the horse is a materialization, a temporary form that holds that quality of energy. And it holds it in that shape, in that form. And in human beings, if they were to experience the horse, the divine energy that lays behind the form of the horse, they would experience devotion. Now, it is, and they would experience levels of devotion. So it is with many other forms, animal forms. They hold certain materializations of certain divine force or of certain divine energy. A horse is a clear one. A dog is another clear one. A cat is another clear one. An elephant, another. That and people, then sometimes, sometimes people look like cats. I have a close friend who looks just like a cat. It's a terrible thing to say. But it was pointed out to me by other people. I did not realize that he looked just like a cat. And he doesn't look just like a cat. But he has a quality in his consciousness which is the same, and the quality of his mind in this life, which it is divine. These qualities are divine, which will be used in this life. And it is the same essential quality which lies behind the divine form of a cat. And that sheath of his consciousness is working and active in this life. Now, that doesn't mean he acts like a cat. He doesn't. Uh, he doesn't, but it means he has a particular kind of understanding of cats, big ones, little ones. There are many kinds of cats. I mean, they're the big cats and little furry fuzzy ones, and they they all hold. They all hold in materialized shape at a point of evolution a certain quality of divine energy which is separate in their form. And, and there's the mental attitude which goes with that, which informed by a human is very different from the way it is informed in a cat, because a human can give it full expression and pull it out. A cat cannot. But in human form, it brings with it a certain kind of flexibility and organization and a business-like quality of mind and activity. And there is a kind of mind quality which forms have, but cats themselves cannot express because their expressive minds are limited. Human beings express them. And so people often take the form. I mean, sometimes all of us look like some kind of animal or flower. I think it's an amusing trick. You know, if you went through, you can find people who, who if you take, Tony, the kind of assignment you take of noticing those parallels and similarities, you can see an awful lot of it. And anyway, that's the reason, because the quality of consciousness, the form and energy, is something that the human being in that incarnation is working with from a human perspective or a divine perspective.
Let's see, all the way in the back. Yes, that's you, Craig.
Burning away some of the debt. And I wondered if you could say a little more about that. I'm a little confused as to the process of burning away and the process of actually freeing and releasing.
Okay.
The question was that last week Dr. Mackay spoke about burning away some of the nets of consciousness, and there was some confusion about the difference between burning away and as opposed to freeing.
If you use the metaphor of a net as being a kind of boundary to hold learning, in the winding process, these boundaries are laid down in certain shapes and they are filled up with experience. And the boundaries hold the experience, but there is also matter bound inside, and that is the matter, the substance, the thought and feeling of that life. It's bound inside that lattice. The lattice is a lattice actually of the mind. It is the organizational qualities of the mind which were laid down in that life. And they were laid down and solidified and filled when they are revisited, when they must now be cleansed, and that matter, you see, it is all matter. It's all matter. When it is released, when it is electrified, when it is refined, the boundaries that contain it then become loose. Those boundaries are like gold. They can take any form. They can be shifted this way and that way. It is seen that net, the boundaries of that network, originally learned in the clay of life and fired there, are when they are re-experienced, fired again, the residue is released to higher energy, and the tracery, the mental tracery that organized that life is found to be golden and malleable and can take this shape and that shape and can be pulled this way and that way and can hold this kind of force when pulled this way and that kind of force when pulled that way. So that the mind, this tracery, this sanskaric tracery becomes very flexible and golden. And because you see, it is divine. And the property of the boundaries of divinity are all divine. I mean, they are the most divine. So the process of human living, say, experiencing deep anguish and distress and conflict, is a fire. You know, that actually builds a fire in your being. I don't know if many of you know Dr. Wang. And Dr. Wang's principles follow Chinese yoga. And Chinese yoga uh, uh, speaks of the triple burner, where the residue of, of these processes are burned and boiled away and released and the energy transformation occurs. In Chinese yoga, the analogy then is the triple burner. In all ancient systems, the notion that this is a fire because matter is involved. And the reason that I said you have to be able to stand anxiety is the fire has to be turned up higher and higher and higher. And that fire is experienced by human beings as anguish, anxiety, and potential distress. The analogy of a fire is absolutely correct because during these processes there is also a change in thermal sensitivity of the skin and in thermal sensitivity of various organ parts, so that those are experienced often by people. And is that clear, Craig, that the fire? Okay.
Alan.
I would appreciate it if you had a few comments on something that everyone has experienced this past time, and that is being born.
Question was whether Dr. Mackay would comment on being born.
Well, first off, it's good. It is good to be born. The process of birth do you wish me to say something about the process of birth from the child's perspective, or the trauma involved in that, or the...
From both ends.
It seems to me that one of the lovely qualities of the birth process in this world is that it is clearer to women in any incarnation than to men. That the divine process, which certainly seems inexplicable, by which a child is germinated and takes shape in one body, and then when it is mature, leaves that body uh, in a process of separation and and uh, and takes on its own identity and gives to women who are to beings who are incarnating as women a wonderful special feeling of uh, of divine procreation, of a part in the continuity of life, and of also of being used by divine processes. And also a feeling of oneness and then separation. A feeling first of oneness and then separation. The being grows within one and becomes then a separate being. The special tie of that kind, I think, is of most profound importance to the mother rather than to the child, whose central nervous system does not process that kind of information. Yet for her, in her maturity, it does process all of the information, all of the ideas, all of the feelings associated with that, and uh, and is a paradigm of unity, separation, and uh, and all of the beauty and distress that goes with with those processes. I think one of the things that is I think really that's about all I have to say about the general process. I think I'm without a more specific focus. I could go off in 1,000 different directions, and uh, and maybe that's not very wise.
I think we can take one last question. Yes, Ilana.
Yes.
Yes. The question was that we've been talking about the positive forces within ourselves, but she'd like to hear Dr. Mackay say something about the negative or destructive forces within ourselves.
One of the things that um, one of the things that all spiritual teachers speak of is is the uh, is the packaging of feeling. They speak of the packaging of feeling. That uh, that some feelings we package. We take the raw feeling and we package them and we hold those feelings by opposition, by negativism towards others. Others we package because we love in certain ways, and so we package them as packages of love. They're the ones, the positive ones, which push us towards one. But one of the things that human beings do is to learn that these goods and bads, these positives and negatives, had a place. They helped with a certain kind of learning, but they outgrow their usefulness in learning. And they outgrow their usefulness in learning in a spiritual life, because the boundaries, the feeling, the ideas, earlier packaged because of one's own limitations in, oh, this is good and this is bad. This one is for me, this one is against me. This one I must help, this one I must hinder. We package them that way. So we're for certain things, against certain things in balance. But one of the things that happens with on the spiritual path and with the unwinding of sanskaras is that we have to take the feeling, which earlier, because we didn't know any better, we packaged in negative bundles. Experience that bundle and take the energy from it and transform it. That energy then is transformed by us to become positive. Now, there is no way of reaching higher levels of love without reaching down to lower dynamite packages of negativism that in earlier lives, with the archaic boundaries of the mind and the clear purpose of the mind in those earlier lives, we gathered tremendous force of negativism. So if we now are obliged to release that force, to use the energy from it to cut through the boundaries of negativism and to impel our love. We transform it in the sheaths of consciousness and being. It becomes the power of increased love. So it's very important. In early stages of the game, it's terribly important to hate viciously and well and with clear purpose. To be opposed to this, for that. It packages feelings and experience very neatly, very clearly. But then as we learn more, we can release those packages and take the energy from them for our own internal growth. What you suggest is one of the greatest difficulties in spiritual learning. And that is, as people become more able to love and experience more love, they also go through periods when they are more acutely aware of its opposite, more acutely aware. As they are releasing those dynamite packages from the past, they must feel the way those packages were first shaped. And they must feel that negativism. They must feel that anguish. And they must feel that, and then they must deal with it. They must deal with it by transforming it. So what they do in that transformation is to destroy destruction. They destroy the power of packaged destructive force by transforming it in their being and holding the force of it, but transforming it to love. And the spiritual process and the nets of consciousness are concerned with that process. And it becomes a difficulty for anyone following a spiritual path who becomes increasingly sensitive, because he will have periods when he not only is more open to the beauty and resonance and resounding ring of divine force, but powerfully also able to be powerfully gripped, very powerfully gripped by negative feelings. And those he must handle, those he must be able to handle. It is true, since that is the way these things are packaged, and that is the process of growth, there is no escaping it. And people then learn to handle that transformation process. Is that clear?
I wish that our time weren't up, but I'm afraid that it is.
At the next conference, Pascal, we'll talk about this business of sex and these other questions, and America.
Thank you very, very much.